Okay. All righty. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Welcome to week 5. Oh my God, week 5 is here. Things are flying super fast. And today I'm going to be talking to you about finding funding, managing it, and then maintaining it. Okay, so we're going to get into some really some details here about the infrastructure for this and give you tips and some suggestions along the way. And we're going to do some little fun exercise on some grant evaluation. So hopefully you guys have read your assigned grants. It should be fun. Even if you haven't, it should be quite fun. So quick reminders, midway, please make sure you use the formative survey that we sent you. It's 2 questions, what's working, what's not. So please just enter it. If you have any comments, constructive or otherwise, anything really, everything in between, please feel free to use that. We rely on that to make course corrections as needed. So keep in mind our demo pitch day is fast approaching November 14th. People are already signing up to see you guys with your, to hear about your presentations, I guess your launch, you would say, of your different projects and more about them. So that's on the 14th. More details. So there'll mostly be 10-minute presentations with 5-minute Q&A. That's it. So fairly straightforward. And hopefully logic model should make this super easy to do. And then with the funding that we gave you first half, keep track of what you're spending it on. And this is I think a good exercise for you to begin to do that, because you're gonna, wherever your project goes, you wanna keep track of that funding structure that you have on board. Okay, before I go ahead, are there any questions, thoughts, comments at all at this time? Let me make sure everybody in. Okay. Okay, so today we're going to do a couple things. We're going to go over organizational structure. I pinged you guys a little bit earlier about this, a couple of weeks ago about this. And then we get into some fundraising ideas. I'll tell you a little bit of some vignettes about SAI on that, some management stuff, get into some reporting, which the 2 are combined, and then the mock grants study section at the end. So I'm going to keep myself to a timer here so we don't go way overboard. So I'm going to start off with a quiz to all of you, or just a food for thought. You don't have to answer it out loud, but which type of entity should you use for your informal STEM education initiative? So this is actually the term that NSF uses for what you guys are building. They call these the Informal STEM Education Initiative, the ISE. And you have a selection of assortment of options here. So proprietorship, partnership, LLC, corporations, cooperative, fiscal sponsor. I mean, you can get lost in these options, okay? And I had the same sort of list here as you guys are looking at. I know some of you already have structure, nonprofit, I believe, that people are setting up, or already set up, LLC. I think ultimately in the L3C, right? So as you guys are thinking about your head, which one should you use for your ISC program? The answer actually is that it depends, okay? It depends on so many factors, okay? And sometimes maybe you don't need a structure yet. You just need to keep going for a little while until a structure comes to fruition, like the needs are assessed and you're like, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z. So what do you need to consider? Quite a long list of things, okay? You got to think about liability, depending on what you're doing again, flexibility, complexity of what you're trying to do. Sometimes the thing doesn't really need any structure at all because it's too simple for that. It doesn't necessitate a whole organization, if you will. Taxes, again, you start going to the fundraising domain and getting money from people, got to think about that. Legal issues, control, right? The sole proprietorship really gives you the main control individual. Unfortunately, though, the liability comes in at 100% to you if you are the only person sort of running the show. Whereas if you think about a nonprofit, you don't have control. In fact, no one owns a nonprofit, 0% control. You may have the board of trustees and so forth, but no one individual owns or controls the nonprofit. LLC, different scenario there. You can have percentages of equity in a given company. That's what you normally get to see. And then what you saw at the end there, the L3C, which is fairly uncommon. Most of you probably never heard of this one, the L3C. And this is, some states have this. So it's a combination of basically a low profit organization that is for profit, okay? But it's like a low profit setting. So you are basically like a social entrepreneurship enterprises that are making money for social benefit directly. And again, as a nonprofit, you could totally do all that as well. So you ultimately used to think about what is it you are trying to do. Accepting investments is a huge one as well. And then this is the biggest one, state and federal regulations. I could give like a whole lecture on just this part. Regulations from each state, from each, and the federal guidelines that you have and the paperwork that you have to do. Even once you have the formal structure, you need to keep going at that. Okay, so let me just pause here for a second. Make sure, okay, we don't have anybody walked away. So I want to give you a quick case study. SAI 2013 to 2015, we had no formal structure. 2 years. I didn't even know about the L3C. I wasn't thinking about nonprofit, none of it, okay? But I did know this, we bought a domain, yay. So some of you, if you are thinking about buying domains, they're fairly cheap, like 15 bucks for the year, okay? So you should get that quick. Those tend to go very, very quickly. Don't delay, okay? And you guys have funding to do this, right? So that has been one of my like encouragement to some of you that I've met already. Like if you can do this, do it now. Spend a lot of time recruiting members, and I was doing this one by one. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I knew this. So as soon as we get going, I started writing together with people. So it was writing papers on important topics. We really didn't know what we were creating. Actually, there was no I didn't do a logic model, any of that. So everything I'm pushing guys to do, I wasn't doing. Yeah, busted. But it made a huge difference later on to know that I should have done that earlier on. I could have bought myself way more time. But I got advisors along the way because I knew I needed to be talking to people and getting their advice. So, but we did the work, We were not delaying at all on making sure that the work was getting done. And then fast forward 2013 to 2015, again, still no formal structure, again, bought the domain, focus on the work, we're self-funded. A lot of the time the self-funding was the main, my wife and myself were basically paying the bills. And this was the domain, the website, operations for that, and then time. And I put time on there because we were spending a lot of time writing the papers and thinking through about all the submission processing and so forth. So a lot of time was spent in that portal. 2017, moved into a corporation in Massachusetts. And then shortly after that, applied for the 501c3 status and definitely considered the L3C status, but ultimately decided to go with the nonprofit setting because I knew that we were going to be applying for grants and wanted to have the full flexibility to do that and not being inhibited by any for-profit status, for example, which when it comes to it, actually, you won't be inhibited if you are for-profit, whether you're LLC and so forth. So if you go to the NSF, like grants.gov, you will find that some of the grants say, eligibility, whether it's a nonprofit or also you have to be a higher education organization, or for-profit businesses are also allowed to apply. So the SBA, for example, is a great place where the Small Business Association is a great place where you can find a lot of funding for for-profit businesses. Okay, so it's not that you will be inhibited if you're for-profit, it's just the ability or the availability of these things will be smaller. And then most of the foundation require that you are a nonprofit. for example, to get funding in that domain. But that's the good side of being a nonprofit. The bad side is if you're trying to get investors and, you know, these from VCs and so forth, less likely they will fund a nonprofit, because remember what I told you, as a nonprofit, there are no owners. I can't give you a certain equity stake in my company, as you know, as you normally hear, 0% ownership. So that can be a problem. Any funding they give you is a donation at that point. But again, these are things you have to think about as you're setting up your own setup. So it took about a year. From 2017, applied about like December time. By August the following year, we got the 501c3 status. This is different now. There's a whole different application process. It is much simpler, smooth, and it's faster, okay? So things are always changing. You need to sort of read through the details here. I wish I had gotten a lawyer to sort of help me through the process. I figured it out myself, applied, wrote up all the application documents. Would I do it again? No. Of course, getting someone legal help costs money, but try to tap into your university. They do have like some free legal advice. If they can provide that, use it. Absolutely use it. I wish I did that. Would have probably saved me time and also a couple of headaches here and there. I definitely do consider that. But the structure is really, really important, because this helps you sort of organize your thinking as well as to what is you're building. When you're talking to someone, you can tell them, oh, this is what we are. For a while, when we started, there was no structure, as I told you, but all we were using was the idea of what this could be, right? And then here's the actual one project that we want to work on, right? And over time, as more people came to me, I realized, okay, this is what it could be, and started articulating that as we went ahead. And this comes into really huge importance when you're trying to do fundraising, right? So money can come from sponsors, from other people like individual donors, investors as well, services if you're selling things. I know a couple of you are doing that already, which is great, but you got to think about what is it that you're, you know, how are you going to fundraise and get money for your support? Grants, of course, are the biggest chunk for us anyway, but there's a lot of money in grants. And then I didn't put it here, but loans are a possibility, but I don't know if you want to start on have that big a liability earlier on, but something to think about as well. So grants come from foundations, federal as well. Banks, by the way, Bank of America has a whole grants division there you can apply for. Again, you need to be a nonprofit for this, but you can look around and find those opportunities. There's a whole ton of pitch competitions that you guys can Google and just see if they are accepting applications right now. You know, so SAI just got accepted literally 2 days ago to a pitch competition over here at Life Sciences Nonprofits in Boston. So I'm getting ready for that, right? So these things come, and if you win, then you get some funding and some other resources and so forth. But they're there and they're not advertised broadly, okay? They remain hidden for that purpose, that you need to be looking for them to find them, okay? So definitely get your, be on the lookout for these things. This was our first donor, Kevin, right here in the center. So this is my wife and I. We were meeting him later on. This is a year or two later, thanking him because it was his $150 donation that started this whole thing. Okay, at least the external part of getting fundraising. We had been pitching our own money, my wife and I, but finally he was like, "Yeah, let's do this." And I was like, "Really? Wow." And I actually don't remember if we had the 501c3 then. I actually don't remember. I'm not sure. But turns out a donor does not have to give you, you don't have to have a 501c3 to get donations. It's only if that donor wants to get a deduction, right? The deduction at the end of the year, tax year. But as you know, most donors, equate the trust factor with a nonprofit. So that's why you need to showcase that, the 501c3. And also you need to give them documentation after you give them funding, if they were going to claim that for the tax purposes and so forth. So tip here, take lots of photos as you go along the way. Photos and fundraising and storytelling go hand in hand, okay? And so what we were using a whole bunch of tools. Kickstarter was, so after that, we started going on Kickstarter. And this was our first project, the Stories in Science, the Journal of Stories and Science. Raised some funding through PayPal as well. That was our portal. So created a business account through PayPal to be able to accept donations as well. Patreon, if you guys haven't heard of that before, this is really great, especially if you're doing like a podcast of some sort, like a really contained where you're producing like a regular frequency of some sort. Patreon is really good for that. And you can get a couple of people doing like a subscription-based service. They donate $10 a month. And if you get like 10 people doing that, suddenly you have a constant revenue stream that you can use. Buy me a coffee. Curious if anybody has heard of this. If you have, can you put your thumbs up? Okay, yay, okay. So it's a really cool. So it's like a donation thing. People sort of buying coffee, they buy a virtual fake coffee, and then that money comes to you as a donation. And so that was a great tool. We ran a couple campaigns during that. So that was a lot of fun. I had way more photos to show you of me running half marathons, doing fundraising. So I did a lot of half marathons. I went back to my old days. So I did everything possible, okay? Try to do this. And I'll get my friends, family. And this is what you have to do, right? These things that don't necessarily scale. I couldn't run every single half marathon every other weekend, but it gave me a chance to start talking to people and telling them what we're doing and the things that, why they should support us at that point as well. Again, the timeline is fuzzy as to when the first donation and the 501c3, and there's some legal things there we can talk more about at the point of applying. You know, are you eligible to ask for donations, and how far back do you go? And each state has different rules about this. So you definitely need to do your homework. And then, so this was simple, right? Up to this point, it was like a couple $100 here and there. Yeah, not a big deal. As you probably start going through your own journey, things are gonna get really complicated, okay? When people start giving you more money, you think like, yay, and then you're like, oh, as fast as you say yay, you go down to oh, because suddenly now you have responsibilities, you have a lot of all this weight on you suddenly is there, okay? So as you guys are creating your websites and so forth, you probably wanna first of all, start creating like a donor or sponsor page or something. People are going to go on your website, they're going to see who's supporting you, and actually that gives them more confidence to say, hey, this is actually good, and I want to also be part of this group that is supporting you, right? So I'll be sending you guys the SAI logo stuff if you wish to put it on your website, which I encourage you, please consider it, because that's something that we are trying as well to help you guys get funding. But it gets more complicated, right? As you can imagine, you're going to get funding from multiple different sources, whether it's a granting organization like this, BWF, to a sponsor. So if you're doing an event, they may give you money. And we can talk more on some people who are like, how do you approach like a Thermo Fisher for funding and so forth. Some are formal, like Novartis has a whole portal you can do this. And most of the time they do not. You have to go to the company, find someone that's involved and email them. In fact, you can email a whole bunch of people. None of them will respond. None of them will respond, okay? But one or two will respond and say, hey, okay, how can we help you? And what's in it for us? What's in it for us? They want to know, okay? iGene was an early sponsor of ours, but there's so many of these things that you can try. But remember, this is where it gets really complicated. And that's where management and reporting becomes such a huge component of this, okay? You need to be able to set up these systems early and the foundation to be steady, to absorb all the different sources and keeping track of things, okay? Now, I don't know if any of you right now are using your own personal bank accounts to run these things. I did so for the first, like initial, maybe year or two. I wish I didn't. Okay. I wish I did not. But I still managed to rescue that. But if you can avoid it, that would be great, because keeping track of things is difficult when you're mixing in your personal and your like business in a way domains. So you need to get super organized. You need to get super organized. I'm going to repeat that. Be super organized and start now. And this actually takes you in whatever you do. If you're going to be running a lab, or you're going to go into and running a unit in a bigger company, being able to track things is super important. And you need to start now. And the key stuff that you need to be knowing are your bank balance, money coming in, money going out. Simple as that. Okay. And so you be able to spit out these numbers from top of your head right now. If I was to say, hey, how much have you spent on blah, 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 right? Or and how much is left? And what's your burn rate and all these things. So that's really useful to know. And the best way, again, to know is that you don't need any fancy software. It's just as simple as tracking stuff, okay? Tracking everything and coming up with a system that allows you to do this. If you get a grant or you're asking grants, they're going to want to see this type of record keeping, right? Because if I'm giving you money, I need to know that you can handle it and you're stable enough. The one type of funding structure that I talked about earlier, I haven't talked enough about, is the fiscal sponsor, right? If all this is scaring you, like you're like, oh my goodness, Fanuel, this is just too much. I can't do all this right now. I'm like in grad school and everything. I understand. I get it. The fiscal sponsor is actually one option that you may think about as well, because they have the nonprofit, they're a nonprofit normally, and they take care of everything I've just been telling you about, everything, for a small fee, 8-9%. All donations that they'll get for your project, they will take. But you have to find the right fiscal sponsor for your project. And most of the time, they don't give you any more than just a funding structure. They don't help you with fundraising. They may give you a nice software to do that, but nothing else really, no community, none of that. It's really just a funding bank, if you will, that they'll provide you and so forth. So with these three numbers, you can calculate your runway. So it's your bank balance divided by your burn. I can give you an example for SAI. I do quarterly reports to our board every quarter, and the numbers are there. What is our income statement? How much are we burning per month? What's our income for that month? And what are some things financially accounting that we are doing? And it can be definitely overwhelming tracking all these numbers. You need to track them often. There's a bunch of software you can use. You don't need to be spending a million hours doing this. Each one costs different amounts depending on your needs. You need to do your homework as to what makes sense for you. I can't tell you right now, which I can't even make a recommendation necessarily, because it depends on what it is that you're trying to do and what structure and types of things you're looking to do in the future for that. So I say business because if you're a nonprofit or for-profit, it doesn't matter. Accounting is accounting, okay? And keeping track of things is the key here. Some cost some low number, see here, $9 per month. And this varies depending on what resources you want. FreshBook is another one. Zoho, if you're doing, and Zoho has a whole suite of different possibilities and tools you can tap into. Wave accounting is also something that we tried for a while, and it's completely free. You can do payroll as well. QuickBooks is probably what you've heard about. If you haven't, this is the kind of the gold standard, if you will. And in there, super comprehensive, a lot of reporting capability that you can do. The costs add up as you add more features to it. Okay, so you have to think about what it is that you're going to be doing and what do you need. Something that can plug into an accountant and so forth. This you gotta definitely keep in mind. And even if you end up not doing half of these things, let's say you have a fiscal sponsor do this, it's still useful to know that this is what happens, like what's happening in the back end with my money, the funding that I'm raising, right? From a given donor, how much money am I actually gonna get, minus the fees, minus the transaction costs and all that. You need to know that, okay? So we use something called A+ here, and it's designed specially for nonprofits, because there we can do something called fund accounting. And before I get into that, the grant domain, so from doing all these accounting, the reason why it is so important to have this structure, if you're thinking about applying for grants and these other, even these smaller funding pots, if you will, is that you need to have a system of managing those grants as well, finding them and then incorporate them into your accounting software. So if the two can talk to each other, absolutely fantastic. Most of the time they don't, okay? But here's some portals that you should absolutely know about, okay? I've signed up for every single one, and I have them like pinging me when new grants come through. So this is how I'm able to find grants to apply to quickly. The name of the game is applying, applying, applying. You just need to be out there applying as often as you can. GrantStation is great. Some of them cost money to get like a monthly subscription or yearly subscription. The Grant Gopher is also a good one, but it costs like $10 a month, I believe. Flux is really great. It's a grant seeker. So it actually acts both as a grant manager and a grant search portal, which is really good. But it also costs money. So you have to just do your search and find them. Grants.gov, you'll be glad to know it's free. Yay. And it's probably the most comprehensive thing for federal grants. Okay, a lot of grants that are in there. Probably some of you have had the NSF before. You know, all the NSF stuff comes through grants.gov as well. And that is available through there. You can search for those there too. Another one that I usually get random emails from is funds for NGOs. That's also, you need to pay into the system, but they sometimes send you free grants that are applicable. But this is only a tiny, tiny portion. I have my Google, for example, in my phone, Google search function to ping me when there's like a grant, any sort of discussion about nonprofit grants in the science space. So I get all those automatic reminders to be in the know, right? So I recently came across, you guys know Damon John, right, from Shark Tank. So he has some funding that's put together, and it's like calling for people to apply. And I was like, oh, and I just randomly saw it on my Google feed. So guess what? I applied, right? So I don't know. We'll see if we get through, but the name of the game again is applying, applying, applying. And here it is again, applying, apply, apply, and then track everything. Track as much as you can, because that's going to be really, really important. I won't go into too much detail about accounting. I don't know, most of you probably be bored to death. But so I never thought I would like accounting this much, okay? I never thought of like, oh my God, this is so boring, I have to do this. But man, so I'm very much, if we bring an accountant, I'll know exactly what they're doing, when they're doing it, and why. Like, because I've had to learn this myself. How did I do it? YouTube and reading. All of you grad students, postdocs, you know how to learn. So this is learnable. You don't need to be an accountant. Absolutely not. I'm not an accountant. But I can tell you those three numbers, right? Bank balance, how much is coming in, how much is going out. That's it. But you'll be amazed, okay, as to how hard it will be once you get more complicated, how hard it is to calculate those three numbers when things get bigger and bigger, okay? So this slide here, definitely, I think, again, learn about these things. You can expand on them. If you're looking to go into the nonprofit world, definitely fund accounting is important. And all those platforms I talked about earlier, some of them can do this, some can't. A+ can do fund accounting. And the fund accounting essentially means if Google gives you 100,000 and Microsoft gives you 100,000, it all goes into one bank account. It should go into one bank account. You're not going to create 2 bank accounts or 5 bank accounts for multiple different sources. And herein lies the problem. With 1 bank account and 5 different funders, how do you keep track of what, right? So fund accounting is really important because then you can label the funding in your same pot. You know that I have, like, out of the 100,000, 50,000 is for X and 25,000 is for Y. So it's restricted. And these are things that, again, grad school, no one is teaching you this. I know this. But again, I'm not gonna teach accounting right now. The point of this is for you to have just a basic awareness of these systems and processes in the back end, so that when you are running the show, you at least have a basic understanding that, okay, I need to keep an eye on tracking every transaction. Like every single transaction SAI does has a PDF attached to it. So if we get audited, for example, it's all there, right? In actuality, in your personal finances, in theory, you should be keeping track of all the receipts for different things, right? Especially if you're going to claim it for tax season, right? Now, do we all do that? Maybe some of you do. But when you're running an organization like this or any sort of initiative with a legal structure, you need to do that. Okay, so I'm just keeping track of time here. So this, again, don't get bogged down by the details. I'm not going to go into eventualities here. This is SAI. Okay, the structure for financing. The red stuff here are all the control points, because you need to have multiple control points to make sure that your system has checks and balances, so that people are less likely to do bad stuff with the funding. Okay, every single thing coming in is tracked, and every single transaction going out is also tracked. Okay, you literally need to be able to do those two very basic things. And categorizing everything to death. You need to know exactly what's happening to the funding as it comes and goes away. This is our structure for last year. So we track our fundraising and expenses by quarterly, okay? So we just finished Q1 of this year, so it's not here. This graph is only showing this past fiscal year, FY20, showcasing that we had a really strong Q4, okay? Huge fundraising push. We changed our fundraising strategy. And so we've kept with this model. So you can do these little experiments, right? And you can do this data analysis very quickly to show you, hey, is it working, is it not? You know, is my social media sort of push, did it yield anything, right? To be able to show these numbers like this. And all of this, everything I've talked about so far, keep in mind of the logic model, okay? You can get lost in this easily, okay? And I've spent hours and days trying to figure out the funding, right? The financing and what software. You can totally get lost. But if you keep in mind of why you're doing what you're doing, it's actually enjoyable. It is actually enjoyable. I find accounting now it's like there are no emotions there. It's just numbers, just clean numbers, you know? Either you're making your fundraising, either the number is high or it's low. Okay, it doesn't do anything else in the middle, right? And so it's just keeping in mind what your problem is, and I've been saying this a lot, so much now. What's your goal? What you're trying to approach? Everything makes sense. The financing, the accounting structure is really important, depending on your activities and what you're trying to do. Finding donors, investors, for example, it fits in here, right? It's part of that process. And so you need to have all these things in mind. And then checking your assumptions, for example, is also a thing that you need to keep in mind regarding your financing. I remain hopeful, right? So this figure here, getting this peak like this is great, but can you maintain it? What's the assumption that you're gonna get the same fund donor to give you that money again? So check those assumptions in every single step along the way. So this brings us to our little fun activity of the day. So are there any questions about this? I know I kind of went through it quickly because I wanted to make sure we have enough time for this last part. But are there any urgent questions on this? Let me know, and just unmute yourself and ask away any component. And I'm hoping that you can use some of those questions as well and ask in your one-on-one with your mentors about how they've run their own orgs as well.
There were a couple questions in the chat.
Oh, okay, sorry, I actually cannot see those. Let me see. Okay, let me find it. Okay, yeah. So how easy it is to switch from .com to .org? It is actually not that hard if it's available, first of all. So I usually try to buy both at the same time. Like I would always buy them in pairs. .net is not bad also. .net is cheaper than .com and .org. Something I found out. And you can buy through bluehost.com or some other GoDaddy or something like that. And then how to use running for half marathons to fundraise? Yeah, good one. So it's friends and family. I'm like, hey guys, I'm running this half marathon. It's a hard thing. Okay, I'm training, you know, and I'm raising some money for blah, right? So in this case, I said I'm raising I'm running this marathon, this really hard thing, and I'm doing it because I am doing this cool project where we are publishing really inspiring stories in science. And we're using the money to do X, Y, and Z, right? To run the website, to blah, 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 right? So you can do that. And you can use the Kickstarter platform. You can use any other domains. We've done other really crazy things. Let me think. I keep getting these emails for restaurant fundraisers. Like you bring people to the restaurant, they eat, and then the restaurant donates like 20% of the proceeds to you. You gotta get creative, okay? So that's why companies have fundraising divisions. So it just depends on what how creative you can get, and it's really amazing what you can do nowadays with all the tools out there. GoFundMe, that's another option as well that you could do that with. Yeah, hopefully, yeah. Any other questions on that? Okay, so bear with me as I try to figure out these breakout groups that we're gonna do, okay? So I hope you read my instructions. So we're gonna have about 10, 15 minutes for each group, discuss, and then come back, and then you guys will just do Q it, you know, just tell us what you guys thought about the grant, weaknesses, strengths, and then what's your recommendation. So it should be a fun little exercise. So now here comes the interesting part. Let me see. Can do breakout rooms. 9, 2, 3. Okay, manually. Okay, so just hang tight for a second. Take a deep breath, and I will add people to different rooms. Okay. Rosario, Selena, and DJ. Okay, so hopefully this works. We're gonna chat in your rooms, and then about 12, 15 minutes later, I'll ping you, and then discuss strengths, weaknesses, and then come back to the main room, and then we'll do a quick show and tell, and then we'll wrap it up after that. Okay, so have fun. All right, let's see if that works. Hi, Umi. Let's see.
Hi.
Hey, did you get an invite to go to a breakout room? Oh, okay, there you go. Perfect. So for those of you who are watching this, what's happening now is the trainees are assessing 3 grants. They got these grants about a week ago, and these are mock grants. And so they are working together as a group to share their insights. They've read them already. They're coming in and saying, this is what I thought about the grant. We should fund it. This is what I thought about the grant. It's not very good. Let's not fund it. So they'll do that for about 10 or so minutes. And then afterwards, they will come back together, and then they will present it to everybody, 2 or 3 minutes, and with their recommendation on what should be, should the grant be funded or not. So it's a little good way for them to get themselves out of their own projects and think about other projects and then how they could articulate their own ideas and their own projects through a grant. So for those of you who are still watching, feel free to fast forward a couple of minutes ahead to when this actual study section starts. But here's an example of a grant that they received. So they're reading this, they've already read this, and so they're gonna discuss it amongst themselves and then come back and then provide their thoughts process on if they should, get funding or not. Okay, group two is back already. So I feel like you guys have you made your decisions. Good, good, good. So we'll be excited to hear what you guys decide and why. I'm gonna pull everybody back in about 30 seconds. Hopefully that was a little bit of fun to try to experience that. Um, when you start applying to these things and you start getting feedback, that's when you really see like, oh yeah, that doesn't make sense. All right, let me try this instead next time. And the next time will be 1 year from now. So it hurts. It hurts a lot. Let's pull everybody back. Okay, so everybody's gonna be back. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Looks like we have everyone back. Yay. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we'll get right to it. Hopefully that was hopefully an informative exercise. Okay, so this probably takes place in different formats to different organizations, and I'm hoping now in this section, next part, where each of the groups will just do a quick short presentation regarding the deliberation and the decision, to inform other members of the committee, as to why you made your decision for X or Y. So group one, would you please, whoever is a spokesperson, could you tell us about your grant and your decision? So Rosario.
I think we forgot to nominate a spokesperson. So Rosario, you want to go ahead for it? Oh, okay. I'll do it. I think we at the end of it would say we probably wouldn't fund the grant, but with kind of a question that we came back to the group for of it's a pretty tiny amount of money they're asking for. It's $1,500. So we can circle back on if you just ask for a low enough amount of money, maybe someone helps you fix your project a little bit and then gives it to you. But the main reason we decided not to was their idea was really nice and that they want to engage young students with science more. But the way they are approaching doing it is, for lack of a better term, a little bit insulting to like the school system in that they're essentially saying the current teachers aren't trained well enough to teach K through 5 students chemistry, but these high school students we're going to bring in are going to be good enough to do so. And then they don't really address like a particular problem. They say like students aren't engaged enough in science, but how do you prove that? And they kind of sort USA TIMSS scores with it, but that's standardized testing is not a super awesome metric of student engagement. So lack of like a clear presentation of a problem and then lack of a like feasible way to fix that problem was why I think we kind of came with a thumbs down.
Okay, so lack of clarity in the problem statement and their approach as well. Questions from the rest of the committee members? Do you buy what DJ just said, or have any questions about the problem and their decision point? Everybody satisfied? So keep this in mind, right? In reality, when like real grants are up for grabs, you would hope like if the other members would have read a few of the grants too, they'd be like, hey, DJ, I completely disagree with you. Okay, let me tell you why. Okay, I don't think it's insulting for the teachers. All they're suggesting is that they want to be supplemented, blah, blah, blah. So it can be quite an engagement, shall we say, on that. But group one, thank you for your insights. And I'm hoping that lack of clarity that you see there, when you are writing your own grant, you now will be able to like, okay, does this make sense? Imagine on the other receiving side for that. Thank you for that. All right, so we have a no already. Let's see if we can get a yes somewhere in here. Group two, you're up. Sarah.
I'm the spokesperson for group two. So our grant was an application for $120,000 to fund the adaptation of like a card-based game to teach kids what it's like to be a scientist into like a mobile game. And we decided we don't want to fund it. We decided no, because we felt like we didn't have enough detail of what the funding was going to go to. It was like $80,000 just to like the game developer, and didn't really know, like, is that a salary? Is that something? And then another $40,000 to develop like educational resources for teachers to go with it, and advertising, but that wasn't broken down. We didn't know like what qualified the people that were applying for it to write educational resources. As someone who studies teaching and learning, that was a point that I really cared about. And we weren't clear, we didn't feel like there was enough evidence for why this game in particular was the best thing to teach players about what it's like to be a scientist, and why putting it in a digital format would be better or worse than just the card game itself. We appreciated yes, it might be available to more people, but they didn't even say if the game was going to be a free game or a paid game on mobile. So we just had a lot of unanswered questions that we didn't feel like we could give that much money to.
Good. I like that. Questions from the rest of the committee members? So it sounds like it's a game of some sort they're trying to digitize, right? It's an existing game they want to digitize. And lack of clarity in how, like, how their money is going to be used exactly, right? The big chunk, 80,000 to blah, right? And 40,000 to blah. So I will tell you a secret. This is an actual real life thing that we used. It was ours, actually. and so this is actually great. So this was actually not an actual grant. This was a concept note. Okay, so you guys picked up exactly, right? So imagine you're a funder, you're getting this. The idea here, some of the funding, they require what are called a letter of interest. Okay, you're pitching to them and saying, hey, this is what we are thinking of using. So rarely do you go in details like this. It's like, oh, I'm going to spend 20,000 for this, and this is why this person is an expert on this, blah, blah, blah. And that's why you are missing so many details. And so the question really there becomes, would you want to know more? Right? Would you want to know more? Would this, if they were to articulate the details, would it be something that at least would you invite them to write the full grant? That is the real question. So I'm curious to the group, would you have invited them to apply for the full grant? If I rephrase the question.
I think I would want more information, so I'd be open to reading more information, because they could have all the answers to our questions.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, sorry. One thing that what we also talk about is like, so we had the kind of like the highlights of the budget, but we didn't have like a breakdown of the budget, and we didn't know if there was like a part 2 of the application that we were not seeing.
Yeah, perfect. So these are great questions, right? This is exactly what you want to be asking, and part 2 was exactly missing from that intentionally. So to save you guys some time. So can anybody guess what happened to it? Did we get invited to apply? No, we didn't. and you can have the perfect grant, perfect pitch, and you can still get a no, okay? It's just a guessing game a little bit after some point. So you need to apply, and make it, hopefully make it down the rounds 1, 2, 3. So that was a real life grant, and I can show you a graveyard of my rejections. It's growing every day, but I learn a lot. And then if you can get feedback from people, absolutely try to get feedback. I'll get a rejection from an email, and I'll say, oh, fantastic, thank you so much. Can you tell me more? How far away from the non-funding were we? From the funding line were we? Sometimes you learn like you're only a couple points away. Okay, and sometimes that could be very like demoralizing. You're like, oh my God, I'm 5 points away from this thing. But at least it tells you you're close by. So thank you, group 2. All right, group 3. Thoughts on your proposal? What was it about, and what's your decision?
Yeah, so we had a proposal for a program called STEM Entrepreneur for high school students, and they were requesting $7,500 for a program. And so the program aimed to connect the dots between STEM and entrepreneurship and high school students. So we were like, great, this is a cool idea. We really like the idea. But we had problems with in general about the objectives being really vague, and also like the flow of information, where they included the information in the format they gave in the different sections of the grant. Like for example, like in the methods as to how the program would run, it was very like rambling and incomplete because they bring up things later on in the grant application that they didn't talk about in the method. So we were like, what? Is that a thing you guys said you were gonna do? Also, we had a problem with possibly some of the evaluations not truly addressing some of this objectives, because the objective was very vague, so we weren't even sure how they could evaluate this. And then lastly, so it seemed like one sole person was overseeing everything. And he was getting paid, that basically the amount they're requesting was going all to him for his time and involvement, and also it was being used to purchase a game that he invented for every single student, and there was like I think 36 students in the program. And lastly, in the funding, in the budget area, it just said the total amount they're requesting, and then also the overall program budget. And the overall program budget was less than what they were requesting, and there was no breakdown, so we were just kind of confused about how that added up. So we decided not to fund it.
You guys are a tough crowd. This is fantastic. I'm so excited that you guys are tough on that. So yeah, so interesting game, right? And you pointed a couple of things that I think are really important. The individual, like it was like a one person, right? Doing this. Keep in mind, like some of you now are essentially one person entities, right? And you're doing this. So when you're writing your budget and so forth, you got to keep that in mind. A lot of funders are going to look at the team. They're going to look at, say, okay, do you have the capacity to do what you want to do? Okay, so that's something to keep in mind as you are trying to write these proposals out. So these were intentionally picked to be some of the weaker ones that we have gotten rejected from before, except the first one. The first one wasn't ours. The last two were, both of those were from team members of ours. And so you definitely, I get some of these requests sometimes where individuals approach me and say, hey, can we write a joint grant, or can we write this grant and try to do it through your group? So you sort of get them working with them, applying, writing and everything. But I'm hoping this was a useful exercise just to see those details and how important they are. The problem statement, and then each grant, and I encourage you, the rest of you, to go and look at the other ones if you haven't. They are all different, right? Each funder is asking for different things at different points. And that can be very frustrating because they're not standardized, which is fine. But you'll find yourself like, you know, you'll take the same grant and spit it 500 different ways for the same information. Okay. The NSF is perhaps the most detailed one I have done. So this is the one I'm applying for right now. And that one, for example, the evaluation section is essentially almost the whole grant, almost. Like it's your logic model, and then you go at each of the outcomes and the metrics and the justification for the outcome and how it connects to the goal. Each one, line by line, okay? And then what expertise do you have to execute that specific evaluation part? And what about the team? Justify each team member and why they're in the program. Okay, and then justify them again for the funding that you're requesting. And on and on and on. So what I would recommend is for all of you like this, try to create a grant calendar, plan your entire essentially year out, and know when the deadlines are, and then start working on it over time. Sometimes you may come across something that's due in a week and you put something crap, you know, but sometimes if you know in advance that you need this, work on it, work with people, send it to people, get feedback, and then put something, put a solid foot forward in terms of your work. And it turns out a grant that is like 10,000, sometimes it's just as much work, if not more, as something that's 100,000. So you have to keep in mind your resources. Where do I want to spend my time? If you can apply to both, I apply to everything, okay? Beggars can be choosers. So you apply to everything as much as you can, however small. I am not, you know, you try your best, basically. Put a different amount. So for the last group, I'm sorry if anybody had anything to add extra from the last group on that. I think, okay. I think Danielle did a great job, and all of you did a great job. All the spokespeople did a great job showcasing, and I'm hoping that this logic model process is allowing you to ask these questions, you know, every time you see this and so forth. Little tip, I've been sending you this on Slack. Try to go to like funded programs on Sloan, like the Sloan Foundation, for example. Read that short description as to what was funded, and look at like sometimes they give you a lot of information about the evaluation and how they're doing it. The grants the NSF, for example, .gov does this, and it gives you a lot of ideas about like, wow, okay, you're looking for this type of program or these types of analyses. The informal STEM, I think the informal science portal that I've sent you before, informalscience.org, has a wealth of resources on evaluation plans that you could use and examples as to what works and, you know, what is typically looked for. Don't be afraid. Don't lose hope when things like you're getting rejections after rejections, or if you reach out to a sponsor and all of them don't respond or they take forever. That's part of the process. Okay. Nowadays, you build a thick skin and you don't give up, you know, or donors, for example. We've done some fundraising gigs and there was like $20 or something we didn't get much, basically, to put it that way. You should not give up. It's, you're gonna have those ups and downs along the way. And I did spend a lot of my own money on this, you know, but no regrets at all. No regrets, because that really made a difference. Because I believed in what if I'm not going to put my own funding in there, then why would I ask someone else, a funder or donor, to put their money in there? Like, why would I do that? So with that, I'm hoping this was a nice, just quick overview of the nitty-gritty of fundraising and managing that money. Have a good plan, okay? That's what's going to make a huge difference. And then maintaining it. Start doing the homework right now as to what makes the most sense. You know, if you don't want to have that headache at all, fiscal sponsorships is another strategy to go. You can do that for a while, and then once you're ready to venture out into your own domain, you can leave as fiscal sponsor and start your own organization independently. You can do that. Other headaches, of course, are on board with that, but it's an option if you don't want to deal with it right now. I didn't deal with it for a long time. We were just a no structure entity for a couple of years. and that's when I was just using my own funding. So it didn't really matter. And our costs are very minimal. But yeah, that's up to you to think about. I do want to, so Gabriela, you have a full nonprofit already registered. So I think she's also a great resource and has a really nice checklist, if you will, right, for California on how to do that. And so, Gabriela, can I share that with everybody? Is that okay? Okay, great. So some of the guidelines there I think are really well articulated. California, again, each state is slightly different, but for those of you who are thinking about nonprofit, there is an option there. Fiscal sponsorship is a viable option as well. And if you're interested in that as well, please ping me or ask your mentor if they know something about it, but happy to talk to you as well about that, because there are a ton of fiscal sponsor organizations that are out there that you could tap into. Okay, well, this was fun. I'm hoping this was helpful and educational. So I will look forward to seeing you next week.